Welcome to EPG Pathashala. I am Prof.G. Vedaparayana, retired Department of Philosophy, SU University, Tirupati. Now we are going to take up the lesson Indian Religion and Philosophy, and the module that I am going to take up now is Buddhism of Indian philosophy. And as you know well, that Buddhism is one of the important systems of Indian philosophy, and it is a Nastika Darshana, just as Jainism and Charvaka. Nastika means here it does not accept the authority of the Vedas. It is also a theistic system because it doesn't accept even the existence of God as the creator, sustainer and the destroyer of this universe or the world. And the objectives of learning for this lesson is introduction to Buddhism and Buddha's birth and enlightenment, Buddhist literature, councils, the teachings of the Buddha. The main is Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and the other important doctrines of Buddhism, that is doctrine of impermanence or universal change, the doctrine of dependent origination, the doctrine of no self, the doctrine of rebirth. And in the end we are going to give a summary of the entire lecture. In an introduction, we should say the founder of Buddhism is Siddhartha or Gautama Buddha. He was born in a royal family of Kapilavastu. Now it is in Nepal, situated at the foothills of northern Himalayas, and he was born in the 6th century BC, and his father was King Siddhodana and mother was Maya Devi, who died just a few days after she gave birth to Siddhartha. And Prince Siddhartha renounced the worldly life, leaving behind his kingdom, his wife and his son by name Rahula. So this is the, in a brief, Buddha's life. He was a prince, but at the same time he was dissatisfied with the life that we people are living. He found that something wrong in the way of living, that there is suffering in our life. So therefore he wanted to find the truth of life, or the truth of the nature of suffering and the liberation of suffering. And reasons for his quest for truth is the sight of a deceased person, a person of old age and a dead person impressed him with the idea that life and world are full of suffering. He became an ascetic and he became a carefree mendicant with a resolve to search for and discover the real source of pain and the means of complete deliverance from pain or suffering. In his quest for enlightenment, Siddhartha approached many learned scholars and religious teachers. So this is what we have to bear in mind, that Buddha did not take to his own path just like that. He inquired into the truth by taking the prevailing sources of knowledge. He read the Vedas and Upanishads, and he consulted many teachers, spiritual teachers that were there in his days, and he was not satisfied with any of the scriptures he read. He was not satisfied with any of the teachers that he consulted, and therefore he took to his own path of search for truth or the secret of suffering and liberation. So he studied the scriptures and practiced great austerities, but nothing satisfied him. The extreme form of his ascetic life made him completely weak, that is physically and mentally, and pushed him to the verge of death, and he eventually it led him to adopt the path of moderation and intense meditation. He resorted with iron will to a meditative mode of making his mind free from all disturbing thoughts and passions. And then Siddhartha became the Buddha, which means the enlightened one, and he was the light of Asia. Buddha attained parinirvana at the ripe old age of 82 at Kushinara in approximately 483 BC. See, this is what we have to bear in mind, that Buddha took to middle path of inquiry into the nature of suffering and its liberation. And he avoided both the extremes. See, first he adopted the extreme path of not eating food also, eating very little and drinking very little, and thereby he became very weak and he became on the verge of death. He was about to die, and he realized that path is also wrong, just as the path of self-indulgence is wrong. Self-indulgence means you enjoying the pleasures and then seeking for truth. That is not possible. At the same time, extreme self-mortification is also not correct. So he avoided both the extremes of inquiry into the nature of suffering and secret of suffering and liberation. So he took to Madhyama Marga, or the middle path. So after the enlightenment, Buddha taught the truth through discourses and dialogues, which were later on codified and classified into 3 baskets, which are known as Tripitakas. And the first Pitaka is Vinaya Pitaka, second is Sutta Pitaka, third is Abhidharma Pitaka. And Vinaya Pitaka deals mainly with the rules of conduct of the Buddhist order, that is Sangha. Sutta Pitaka comprises Buddha's sermons and dialogues. It consists of 5 collections, that is 5 Nikayas. One is Digha Nikaya, another Majjhima Nikaya, third is Anguttara Nikaya, fourth is Samyukta Nikaya, and fifth is Kuddhaka Nikaya. These are the 5 Nikayas. And Abhidhamma Pitaka contains the exposition of the philosophical doctrines relating to the physical, psychological and soteriological issues. Tripitakas are written in the Pali dialectic, in which Buddha taught his teachings. So this is the structure of the literature that is available for Buddhism. That is Tripitakas, Vinaya Pitaka, Sutta Pitaka and Abhidhamma Pitaka. And another important point is that all these things were codified after the death of Buddha, and they were codified in Pali language only because Buddha himself taught in Pali language. And Buddha is known as the light of the Asia, and we know Edwin Arnold has written a book by name The Light of Asia, the Buddha. So Buddha became so famous after his enlightenment, and he taught this first teaching, that is to his own friends or to his own associates who tried to attain enlightenment along with him, but they were dissatisfied and they discontinued their inquiry. And after Buddha became enlightened, he called those disciples or friends, and he taught his enlightenment teaching first to his associates who were with him in search of enlightenment. So Buddha's views on various issues as reported by his most intimate disciples in the 4 councils held after Buddha's demise. So they codified these teachings after Buddha's death by having some councils now and then, more particularly 4 councils. The first Buddhist council was held at Rajagruha to establish the canon of the Vinaya, that is the discipline of the order. Second Buddhist council was held at Vaishali to resolve the 10 controversial points of the Vinaya. And third council was held by Ashoka at Pataliputra, where the Pali canon of the doctrine for elders, that is Thaviravadins, was compiled, and the fourth Buddhist council was held at the 1st or 2nd century BC under the leadership of King Kanishka to consider and compile the tenets of Sthaviravada school. So, as I already mentioned, they needed 4 councils in order to clarify what exactly Buddha had taught, and they modified some of their teachings, and they eliminated some of the things that are unnecessary, and they included some of the things that Buddha had actually taught, and they assembled people who had actually listened to the teachings of the Buddha and ascertained what they had actually heard from Buddha. Then only they prepared these Vinaya Pitakas and also the Nikayas, 3 Pitakas and 5 Nikayas. And now let us look into the major Buddhist schools. Why we are calling it major means it is possible that there are innumerable types of Buddhist schools. Though first major Buddhist school is Hinayana, second is Mahayana, and another is Sautrantrika school, and Vaibhashika school, and another is Madhyamika school, and another is Vijnanavada school. So these are variously called that these are Hinayana means it is confined only to a small group of people who follow Buddhism very strictly, and Mahayana means it's a big ship where people who are not so strict, who are not so knowledgeable, they can also come into this Yana. Yana means ship, Maha means a big ship which takes many people into the fold. And Sautrantrika Buddhism is a critical realistic school, whereas Vaibhashika is a direct realist, and Madhyamika is a nihilist, and Vijnanavada is idealistic schools. And generally it is considered that Mahayana and Vijnanavada, they belong to the Mahayana school. Madhyamika and Vijnanavada belong to Mahayana school, and Sautrantika and Vaibhashika belong to the Hinayana school. And Mahayana and Vijnanavada, they are written in Sanskrit literature, so it is called Sanskrit Buddhism, whereas the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika literature is found in pure Pali literature. Then the teachings of the Buddha, salient characteristics of Buddha is, Buddha was primarily an ethical teacher and a reformer who rejected metaphysical speculations. His concern is pointing the way of life that leads to liberation from suffering. He did not entertain the metaphysical questions, for they are impractical and they are a barrier to the practice of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. One who indulges in raising metaphysical questions and seeking speculative answers is utterly foolish, like the one who, with a poisonous arrow plunged into his body, spends time in idle speculation regarding the identity of the maker and the shooter of the arrow, instead of trying to pull out the arrow immediately. See, this is the important point that we have to make note when we want to study Buddhism. That is, Buddhism is not at all metaphysical in his approach to understanding of life. Metaphysics is a waste of time according to Buddha, because it indulges in questions that are not relevant to life, and also we try to seek answers for such irrelevant questions. It is also irrelevant to obtain those answers, and answers can never be definite because the questions themselves are not definite. So Buddha has likened the person who indulges in metaphysics like the one who is stuck by the arrow. There is arrow in the body, and arrow is of containing some poison, but this man Instead of going to the doctor and get a treatment, he is asking other people, who is the person who has hit me with this arrow? Who is the maker of this arrow? I want to know. I want to take vengeance against that man. I am not interested in my treatment. So metaphysics should not be given importance in inquiring into life. These are the metaphysical questions that Buddha has formulated, or generally that we ask. That is, first metaphysical question is whether the world is finite or infinite, whether the world is eternal or non-eternal, or whether the Tathagata means who has got enlightenment, whether he lives or doesn't live after his death, whether he both lives or doesn't live, or neither lives nor does not live again after the death. Another question is, Buddha regarded these 10 questions as indeterminate, that is avyakta or avyakritam in Pali. Ethically, these questions are unprofitable, and therefore Buddha refused to discuss or answer them. These questions are also indeterminate, for they lead us to uncertain and impractical answers without any sufficient evidence. The solutions resemble the conflicting one-sided accounts of the elephant given by different blind persons who can only touch and feel the different parts of the elephant. So this is another example that Buddha is giving people who indulge in metaphysical questions and metaphysical answers. They are like blind people who can know only truth partially. Just as a blind man who touches the ear of the elephant, he says elephant is like the big fan, or who touches the legs, he may think that elephant is like a pillar. So therefore both are wrong, because they have not seen the actual elephant. A person who indulges in metaphysics can never see the truth, and he will be suffering only from incomplete knowledge. So when we come to the actual teachings of Buddha or Buddhism, the first is Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths are Buddha's, we will see it, life in the world is full of suffering, and there is a cross for suffering. And the third noble truth is, it is possible to put an end to suffering, and there is a way that leads to the ending of suffering, that is the fourth noble truth. And Buddha's answers have come to be known as Four Noble Truths. See, so many people have asked him questions, and all these questions and the answers that he can give to these questions are in the form of these Four Noble Truths. Rendered in Sanskrit, they are called the truth of dukkha, the truth of dukkha samudaya, the truth of dukkha nirodha, and the truth of dukkha nirodha marga. So these are the four truths having to deal with four subjects. Then first noble truth, what does it say? What it says is, the first noble truth says that life is full of pain and suffering. Even the so-called pleasures are really fraught with suffering. Fraught means they are mixed with suffering only, but we are seeing only pleasures. The life from the beginning to end is full of sorrow. Even birth is suffering, even disease, old age and death are the sources of sorrow. Losing what we like and having what we dislike is suffering. And loss of things, the loss of kith and kin, is also the source of sorrow. The physical and mental ailments are also sources of sorrow. So this is how Buddha describes the various aspects of sorrow. Whatever you do, whatever you touch, and whatever you think, there is a seed of suffering in that. This is what Buddha has understood and said that every movement in life is a source of suffering. So meeting the undesirable and separation from the desirable is also a cause of suffering. And failure to obtain the expected things and receiving the unexpected things are the sources of sorrow. To Buddha, transitoriness is the ultimate criterion of suffering. What is meant by transitoriness? Transitoriness means that everything is permanent and subject to constant change. Logically and factually, everything is subject to the law of transitoriness, that is momentariness. There is nothing immortal about us and about anything in the world. Everything, including our personality, is subject to change and destruction. So one thing that we have to bear in mind, that while Buddha is talking about suffering and declaring that everything is of suffering, he is saying the crux of suffering is that there is transitoriness in this world. Nothing is permanent in this world. Nothing is there, at least for some time, as it is. Every moment, everything is changing. But we are under the wrong impression that everything is permanent, everything is static. We are not permanent, we are not static. Even the human being is constantly changing. And even the world is constantly changing. So, we realize that transitoriness is the truth of this universe. And if we ignore that, we become victims of suffering. Then, second noble truth is that there is the cause of suffering. Sorrow is not devoid of cause. And there is nothing which is a causal. A causal means there is nothing without cause. So accordingly, in life, suffering, old age and death, which means jara marana, is there because birth is there. That is, birth is the cause or the condition of suffering arising out of old age and death. Birth also has its cause. That is, it has conditions, namely the will to become. See, this is what we are going to see, how sorrow is dependent on many factors. Sorrow is not there by itself. It is a production of many instances. Birth is the cause. And why birth is there? Because there is, death. And why death is there? There is because birth. And birth also is produced by the bhava, that is will to become, which is again has its own cause, namely the mental clinging, that is grasping to things. In Sanskrit it is called upadana, which means the objects in the world, which in turn is caused by the thirst, that is craving. Grasping is there because craving, that is trishna, is there. Trishna means our attitude to enjoy objects of senses and sight and sound. So thirst again is not independent of itself. It is also dependent on something else. What is it? Thirst is caused by the previous sense experience tinged with pleasant feelings. That is Vedana, which means it is in Pali, it is Vedana, even in Sanskrit it is Vedana, which in turn is caused by contact, that is Sparsha, which is impossible without another cause responsible for it, that is sixth sense organ of knowledge, which means Shadayatana or Shadayatana, which are also dependent for their existence on the mind-body organism. So in Pali it is known as Nama Rupa, which is our personality or a perceptible being. So this personality or the mind-body complex is dependent on the condition or the cause preceding to it, namely the initial consciousness of the embryo, which is known as in Pali Vinnana or Vijnana in Sanskrit, which is the principle of life without which the personality would be a dead thing. That is, unless consciousness descends into the embryo, the mind-body complex would be devoid of life. But even this consciousness is the effect of another cause, namely the impressions, which is known as sanskara or sankhara of the past existence. Then the impressions of the last state of the past life which initiate our present existence. See, impressions of the past life are responsible for the present birth. So they are the effects of all past deeds which cause rebirth. But the impressions are not an independent phenomena, but have their own cause, namely ignorance, which is the ultimate cause of suffering. Ignorance is the ultimate cause of suffering. And this is the causal chain of suffering, which involves 12 links starting from suffering to ignorance. So this is also called the dependent arising of suffering. It has also been known or designated by various epithets. Epithet means various names, such as the 12 source of the wheel of rebirth, that is Dvadasha Nidana Bhavachakra. Dvadasha means, Dasha means 10, Dva means 2, that is 12 sources of Bhavachakra. Bhava means birth, while we are alive. Our life chakra, the cycle of our life, turns in 12 stages. This chain has got 12 links that we have seen, and these 12 links are always moving, and they are responsible for the cause of suffering. So first noble truth we have seen, just there is suffering in life. Second noble truth we have seen is that there is a cause for suffering, and cause is a 12 linked chain. Each is linked with the other, starting from birth to ignorance. Then third noble truth. Third noble truth is the truth about the cessation of suffering. It is found again on the principle of dependent origination, but this principle now has to be understood in reverse order. Everything arises depending on some causes and conditions. If these causes and conditions are removed, the effect also gets removed automatically. Thus, the cessation of suffering begins with the cessation of ignorance, which was the cause of impressions, that is sankharas or samskaras. With the cessation of ignorance, the impressions will cease to be. And with the cessation of the consciousness, that is mind-body complex, will cease to be. And with the cessation of the mind-body complex, the six senses, that is Shadayatana, will cease to be. And with the cessation of the six senses, six sense organs, the contact will cease to be. And with the cessation of the contact, the cessation, the sensation or the pleasant feeling will cease to be. And with the cessation of the sensation, thirst will cease to be. And with the cessation of the thirst, grasping will cease to be. And with the cessation of grasping, becoming will cease to be. And with the cessation of becoming, that is Trushta, there will be the cessation of birth. And with the cessation of birth, there will be the cessation of disease, old age and death. And with the cessation of disease, old age and death, there will be the cessation of suffering. Thus, the 12 linked cycle of cessation of suffering comes to an end. As I have already told, the third noble truth means the ending of suffering. The ending does not take place all of a sudden. We have to, recycle all the 12 links. We have to bring them back. Just as in the second noble truth, they have moved forward. The chain has moved forward. Now the chain of suffering is moving backwards, which means it will cease to be. The ignorance will cease to be, tanha will cease to be, and becoming will cease to be, and there will be no birth at all. And birth means birth of suffering, and the birth, cessation of birth will be cessation of death. And when there is the death for this nama rupa, the personality, the five-membered complex, then there will be the cessation of suffering. So this is the understanding of it. Now we go to the fourth noble truth. What is the fourth noble truth? Fourth and the last noble truth is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. That is, this is called the noble eightfold path, the practice of which puts an end to the suffering. Mere knowledge of truth of suffering, causation of suffering and the cessation of suffering is not enough. It is necessary to go beyond the intellectual understanding of the network of suffering and actually realize the state of nirvana or state of liberation from suffering. And the path is also known as the middle path, which steers clear of the extremes of self-indulgence and in pleasures and self-mortification. So, the first truth has given the knowledge that there is suffering. The second truth has given the knowledge that there is cause of suffering. The third truth has given the knowledge that it is possible to put an end to suffering. So they constitute, the first three noble truths constitute only the knowledge about suffering. The fourth noble truth is the path, the practice from which or through which we are going to put an end to suffering. And this is noble truth, that is the fourth noble truth, is also known as the middle path leading to the cessation of suffering. And as I have told in the introduction, middle path is steering clear between the extremes of self-indulgence and self-mortification. And also it is the middle path steering clear of eternalism and annihilationism. Eternalism means yes, everything is permanent. Annihilationism means that nothing exists even for a moment. No, even that is wrong. So the fourth noble truth is middle path, and we are going to see what is this middle path as the fourth noble truth. So noble eightfold path, which means it has 8 steps of this path, and these 8 steps are as follows. That is, first step is right view, that is samyak drishti. Second is right thought, that is samyak sankalpa. Third is right speech, that is samyak walk. Fourth is right action or right conduct, which means samyak charita. Fifth is right livelihood, samyak ajivana. Sixth is right effort, that is samyak vyayama. Seventh is right mindfulness, that is samyak sati. And last or eighth step is right concentration, which means samyak samadhi. This is how the seeker after enlightenment has to proceed from, the first step, which is right view. Now we will explain a little bit of the 8 steps. And right view means, right view is the rejection of superstitions and irrational ideas about life and the world. And right thought means, right thought is thinking without ill will, without anger, without hatred, and without delusion or deception. And right speech means it is that which is avoiding lies, speaking lies, and we should avoid double talk. And tale bearing. Tale bearing means, going to others and telling them all stories about others. That is tale bearing. And we should not indulge in gossip also. We should not chatter unnecessary speaking. And right speech also means there should be no malicious and careless language. We should use language very carefully. And right action or right conduct means that is our behavior should be without, stealing, without lust or violence. And samyak ajivana, which means right livelihood. It is leading a life of righteousness and purity, which means if you are earning the livelihood by this means, you should not go to wrong jobs, wrong means of livelihood. Livelihood should be strictly on moral principles. It should not be injurious to others. It should not cause violence to others. So right livelihood includes a very disciplined profession. And then right effort means strong resolve to adhere to the practice of the Eightfold Path till the final goal is reached. And right mindfulness is steadfast awareness of everything that is going on within oneself and outside oneself. Without oneself means outside oneself. And right concentration is staying or attaining the state of samadhi, which means it is meditation focusing one's attention on the mind, and it consists of 4 stages. See, right concentration is a final stage, a very important stage, and we are going to see that it is having 4 steps. See, this Eightfold Path is divided into 3 parts. First part is wisdom. It contains 2 steps. That is, first 2 steps, namely right view and right thought. They constitute the prajna part of the Eightfold Path. And second part is virtue. It is known as sila part. Sila part contains the 3rd, 4th and 5th steps. What are they? That is right speech, right action and right livelihood constitute the second part of this Eightfold Path. And the concentration path, which means samadhi part. Samadhi part also contains last 3 steps, that is 6th, 7th and 8th. That is right effort, right mindfulness and right meditation constitutes the concentration part of the Eightfold Path. So this is important to know that Eightfold Path is divided into prajna, sila, samadhi. And unless you attain the prajna first, that is about knowledge, then is sila. What does sila means? About conduct. Your behavior constitutes 3 steps. And the samadhi part contains reaching the higher stage. It is concerned about the mental state of Eightfold Path, which means right effort. When you have taken the path of Eightfold steps, then in the 6th step you have to take a resolve that I will never come out of this path. I have to make good efforts and with diligence I have to follow this path. I should not take it superficially but seriously. Then right mindfulness, another part of this samadhi part is you are always concentrating your mind on whatever you are doing. You are mindful of things, not unmindful, not being very negligent, not being very complacent, but you are always concentrating on whatever you are doing. And the final state of samadhi part is the concentration, full concentration, which has got 4 important steps that we are going to see. Then another important doctrine of Buddhism is doctrine of impermanence. That is doctrine of universal change, which means everything is transitory and subject to change and decay. Everything originates from causes and conditions and disappears when they cease to be. Where there is birth, there will be death. Buddha's followers have developed it into a theory of momentariness. It is also called as Kshanikavada. According to this theory, the criterion of existence, that is Satya, of a thing, is its capacity to produce some effect. That is Artha Kriya Karitva Lakshanam. So, we have to concentrate on this part, that is dependent origination, or impermanence is a very important theory of Buddhism, and then the doctrine of momentariness. It has been developed into doctrine of momentariness. Doctrine of universal change is doctrine of momentariness. Then doctrine of dependent origination. We have come across this principle while we were dealing with the second and the third noble truths. That is, everything is dependent on some other thing. Nothing has got its own existence. Everything is produced depending on some conditions and causes. There is nothing without a cause. This is what is meant by the doctrine of dependent origination. And this is also called the Madhyama Pratipat. See, dependent origination itself is known as the middle path. And the middle path means you should not take anything as permanently existing, as permanently getting destroyed. It is there always when causes and conditions are there, and when causes and conditions cease to be there, that object will not exist. So then, doctrine of no self. This is another important theory. This is one of the truths that Buddhism is teaching. That is doctrine of no self. That is anatma. Human being as a whole is analyzable into a collection of 5 groups. That is Panchak Skandhas of changing elements, namely form, that is Rupa, consisting of the different factors which we perceive in the body having a form. Then feelings, that is Vedana, of pleasure, pain and indifference. And then perception, that is Sanya, which includes understanding and naming. And then predispositions or tendencies or impressions, which are known as samskaras, generated by the past experience. And then 5th element is consciousness or vijnana. Later 4 are called nama. First one is called rupa, which means first one is limited to the body, and later 4 are limited to the name of the person. Name of the means personality of the person. The last 4 are of psychological in nature, and first one is physical in nature. So human being is a psychophysical organism. That is why it is called the Nama Rupa in Pali or Sanskrit. Another important doctrine of Buddhism is rebirth. See, we have to be very careful in understanding this concept of rebirth when we want to see it as what Buddha has said about it. So, rebirth is not a transmigration of the same substantial self from one body to another. Rebirth is only a palingenesis of unbroken continuity of the stream of consciousness caused by desire. The continuity resembles the flames of a candle. The flame of each moment is different from the flame of another moment. Yet there is unbroken succession of different flames of a candle. Although different from one another, each flame lights or causes another flame. So the flames are causally connected, even though there is some gap between them. So this is how Buddha has explained the concept of rebirth. Rebirth does not mean that there is one soul, a permanent soul, and this soul will never die, only body dies, and this soul takes another body who is going to be born. So that is the general theory of rebirth. But Buddha rejects this kind of theory of rebirth because he does not believe in the permanent existence of the soul. Soul doesn't exist permanently, and therefore it does not transmigrate. Transmigration means going from one body to another, going from one body to another. It will not die, bodies die, and where there is a birth of another body, this soul goes and enters into that body. So this theory is rejected by Buddha. He has accepted the palingenesis theory of rebirth. What is this palingenesis theory of rebirth? He gives the example of a flame, of a candle. What is the nature of this flame? Flame is not one reality. Flame contains number of flames within itself, and one flame is succeeding another flame. There are moments of flame. That is why we see there is some kind of gap between one moment of flame and another moment of flame. But we are mistaking that there is a continuous flow. But in the continuity, there are moments of flames. So that is how we have to understand our consciousness is having some moments. And if I have desire while I am dying, my consciousness will be reborn in the form of another body. Which means consciousness is not a permanent entity. Because there is a cause, there is trishna, there is desire in my consciousness. This consciousness is going to take shape into the form of body. Otherwise it will not take into the form of body. So we have to understand rebirth by taking the example of candle, not by taking the example of the permanent soul substance. So Buddhism, as a sort of introduction or concluding remarks, we can say a few of the things like this. Buddhism is one of the most ancient and unorthodox religions of the world. It is a theistic religion of reason and meditation, and its doctrines of no self, dependent origination, impermanence are not only scientific but also pragmatic. The doctrine of the Four Noble Truths has been recognized as an effective means of attaining freedom from sorrow. The Eightfold Path, which is also known as the Middle Path, has both metaphysical and moral implications. It was born in India, Buddhism was born in India but went outside and spread in other parts of the world. So this is the most important thing that we have to bear in mind. Buddhism is a very rationalistic system and also a system which is based on our own experience, not on what others have said, not on what metaphysics says. So it rejects metaphysics, gives importance to our experience and also to reason. Apart from this, it doesn't give importance to speculation but meditation. What is meditation? Meditation is a process of understanding your body, your mind, psychophysical complex through meditation. You observe yourself and then you realize that there is sorrow and it is possible to overcome sorrow. And Buddhism, the peculiarity of Buddhism is, it is a very scientific religion also. Scientific philosophy also. Why scientific? It gives importance to experiment. Don't accept what Buddha has said or don't accept what others have said blindly. You experiment with it. You you experience in your daily life, then only you accept what Buddha has said true or not. So it is a philosophy of reason, experience and meditation. And another important point is, although Buddhism was born in India, the pathetic condition is that there is no Buddhism in India. Buddhism has gone outside India and it has spread in various other countries. Even now it is being practiced in most of the South Asian countries like Japan, China, Ceylon, Cambodia. Many of the Southeastern or Southern world, part of the world, Buddhism is very, very rigorously, very, very righteously being practiced. But in India, the Hinduism has dominated Buddhism. Important point that we have to note is, although Buddhism was born in India, it went outside India and it is spreading all over the Southeast Asian countries like Japan, China, Sri Lanka, Cambodia. And so these are the concluding remarks that I can make on Buddhism, which is a religion and also a philosophy. Thank you very much.